Welcome to Vocabulary Hour for our talk radio show. Today we'll be covering vocabulary for Chapter 1, the life and, I can't remember the second part of it, the life and statistics chapter, life and statistics. The first word is hypothesis, which is a tentative explanation for an observation that requires testing to validate. That's part of the scientific experiment or scientific method, rather. A thesis makes significant contribution in the field of biology. Controlled experiment is subject for an experiment who is similar to the experimental subject. However, they are not actually exposed to the experimental treatment. They're used as the baseline to measure if your experiment worked or didn't work or how it worked. Inductive reasoning, a logical process that argues from specific instances to its generic conclusion. The example would be, all cats are black because I've only ever seen black cats, and since I've only ever seen black cats, they must all be black. Deductive reasoning, making a prediction about the outcome of a test. If-then statements. If I think it is, then it must be that way. Statistics, specialized branch of math used in the evaluation of experimental data. Mean, not the angry, mean kind of person from, the hood, just the average value of a group of measurements. That's the mean. Standard deviation or standard error is a measure of dispersion of data from the mean, a measure of the variance of a sample, essentially the average distance a single data point is from the mean for the sample. A placebo is sham treatments used in experiments. The data is information collected by scientists during hypothesis testing. Variables are a factor that varies in a population over time. An independent variable is a factor whose value influences the value of the dependent variable but is not influenced by it. In experiments, that variable is manipulated. The dependent variable is the variable in a study that is expected to change in response to the changes in the independent variable. A double-blind experiment is an experimental design protocol when both research subjects and the scientists performing the measurements are unaware of either of the experimental hypothesis or who is in the control or experimental group. A regular blind experiment is a test in which subjects are not aware of exactly what they are predicted to experience. Anecdotal evidence is information based on one person's personal experience. Causation, a relationship between two variables in which a physical mechanism underlies the connection, as opposed to correlation, which is an interdependence of variable qualities. Does not signify causation, describes a relationship between the two factors, but not the physical mechanism between the two factors. A sample is a small subgroup of a population used in an experimental test. Normal distribution is bell-shaped curve, as for the distribution of quantitative traits in a population. Metabolism, all the physical and chemical reactions that produce and use energy. Control, subject for an experiment who is similar to the experimental subject except is not exposed to the experimental treatment. That's used as a baseline value for comparison. And lastly, a theory, which is based on careful examination of all the facts, generally after a hypothesis and using the scientific method. There you go. Today is the ending for our first vocabulary chapter, life and development.